Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Lineup with Dave Proden. I'm Dave Proden, and this is episode 13. As we mentioned last week with the Ashton Goggins conversation, we're now dropping these on Tuesdays. The response has been pretty positive so far, so we'll continue on this path of work week, school week disruption. If you haven't listened to last week's or any of the prior episodes yet, please check them out. They're available wherever you get your pods. Now, for those turning this on just after we've published, first off, thank you. And also, there's a good chance that the Nazaré Tow Challenge is either running or imminent or is just completed. If it hasn't, there's no doubt that a significant amount of energy is heading for Portugal, so you're likely to see something coming out of there soonish. And this swell, and let's be clear, it's a rare one if it qualifies to greenlight the Nazaré Tow Challenge, happens to coincide pretty nicely with today's episode of The Lineup. I'm not saying this podcast has now developed the power to command the elements and create intense natural events. I'm not saying it either. All right, episode 13. Perspective is a funny thing. For those who are familiar with this podcast and or a bit of my background, you may know that I started at the then ASP in 2006 under CEO Brody Carr and President Wayne Bartholomew. It was undoubtedly a different time. I like some things better now. I liked some things better then. That's the way it goes. And that's hardly limited to surfing. One of the formative characteristics of my early years, however, was our constant battle for legitimacy with our surfers and the industry, the media, and the fans. Competitive surfing was under attack from within the surfing world, and not without reason. It's a theme that comes up constantly in these conversations, but the delivery mechanism for competitive surfing has, at times, been at odds with the surfing world's nonconformist and anti-establishment foundation. A foundation, for the record, that continues to speak truly to me as a human being, and one that I feel is completely right and righteous. Now, it's conversation for another time, but the point as it pertains to today's discussion is that time developed in me a bit of a hardened, insecure, defensive streak for the purity and premium placed on high-performance competitive shortboarding. This streak was developed in equal parts by my pre-ASP experiences in surfing and by the career survival instinct of my early years at the organization. Now, I'm not saying that my perspective was or is wrong necessarily, but I do think parts of it came from the wrong place. And the rigidity with which I approached those early years is something I've had to evolve and grow from since, which has been easy to do on the personal side, and it's gotten much easier to do on the professional side in recent years. And I don't beat myself up too much for not being fully formed at 22, 23 and in desperate need of growth. I'm 36 now, and I am in desperate need of growth. The more you learn, the less you realize you know. The explosion of quote-unquote high-performance surfing across every discipline in recent years, from Mayhem's 5'5" by 19 1/4 fish revolution to Joel Tudor, Devin Howard, Honolulu Blomfield, Chloe Kalman, and others' logger culture, to the SUP phenomenon in racing and in surfing, to the often discussed generational superstar shift on the championship tour, to the big wave psychopathy happening in the tow and paddling realms. All of it has made the widening of this aperture a pretty easy exercise for me. It's all surfing, and it's all impressive, and it's all related. The discussion on premiums, however, and intrinsic value from sponsorship to media to fans is ongoing and related to value. And our guest today is someone who's been at the forefront of this in recent years, and someone whom I've come to admire probably later than most for just how damn impressive his talent is. Our guest today is a born and bred Maui export, a quote-unquote product of his environment, as he puts it, who cut his teeth under the likes of Robbie Naish, Dave Kalama, and Laird Hamilton. He's an 8-time SUP world champion, winner of the Porto Escondido Challenge. He's redefined the parameters of what's possible in things like kite surfing, windsurfing, tow surfing, foiling, and the SUP disciplines. And he's been a constant candidate in the discussion of what is considered the ultimate waterman. And, as discussed today, someone who is beginning to lend his considerable talents to what he calls the hardest thing in surfing. Please enjoy the Lineup's conversation with Kai Lenny.
The good old clap, take one.
That's right.
How many of you knew what you wanted to be when you were 7 years old? I did. I wanted to be a world champion.
Hey, is there honesty involved in this podcast? Can we be honest?
You can shut your fucking lips.
And then I'll just say, put them up, what? Let's go.
He's like, you look too pretty on the wave. Get ugly.
We can talk about DMT if you want.
I thought we were boxing.
Kai Lenny, thanks for joining us on the lineup.
I'm so stoked to be on with you. This is epic.
So we're going to get right into it. You're 27.
Yep.
You're a world-renowned big wave paddle surfer, tow surfer, sup racer, windsurfer, kite surfer. I'm sure I've missed some disciplines. You've been in the conversation in the surfing world as the ultimate surfer and the ultimate waterman in the sense of you're good at everything. And I want to start this off by asking where your head's at in 2020 in terms of how you view your legacy, what you want to accomplish, and who you measure yourself against.
Oh, well, the way I feel coming into 2020 is I really wanted to make it feel like a clean slate. I wanted to feel like I had all the, I have all the opportunities in the world, but I really wanted to feel like I had all the potential within myself, like always. And I think this happens with a lot of people is you're your own worst enemy and you kind of hold yourself back like, yeah, maybe can I do that? Can't I do that? And this year I kind of made a pact with myself. I'm like, I'm going to become the best surfer I have ever been. I'm going to land in small waves, all the maneuvers that I love watching by my favorite surfers. And I want to ride the biggest waves in the world as much as I can. I just want to take everything that I've been doing and fearlessly attack it. And whether I get to those places, I don't know. I'm going through the journey and it's, less about the destination for me. And I don't even think about any legacy as well. I'm 27, but I do feel like I'm 18 still, like in my heart of hearts, I feel really, really young and eager. I've never been more hungry to sort of push my level as an athlete, but as a person. And yeah, I really want to attack this year fearlessly and not be afraid of losing, not being afraid of like failing because I'm going to learn from it and I'm going to persist. And yeah, I just want to be the best surfer I could possibly be this year. 2 foot to 20 foot. Fun's all the same to me.
When you say you made a pact with yourself, is it a specific moment? Are you staring at yourself in the mirror? Are you sacrificing an avocado into a copper bowl? Is it a moment of reflection on New Year's Eve? Or is it just something that kind of built?
Well, I think it's kind of as we enter the roaring 20s, the new decade, it's like it's an opportunity psychologically to just like, what can I make of this round? And the last decade, a lot has changed from 2010 to 2019. It was just, I couldn't have dreamt or imagined or would have wanted to know what it would have been like because I probably would have been scared by all the experiences that I had in big waves but even just the opportunities and even my own surfing progression in small waves and even all the sports that go along with it. A lot has changed and I've always loved how my path was never certain. It was like always kind of winding. There was a freeway next to me and I was just on the dirt road on the side and there was always forks in the road and, I'm just trying to like navigate it all and really focusing now on my gut feeling on what I need to do and make the decisions that I think are really right and weigh things out. But come this new decade, I want to be, I don't even want to know what it'll be like to, 2029 or something, like that should be scary to me right now because hopefully I'm at a place where I'm like, gosh, if I knew, I wouldn't have probably ever gotten to this point, Well,
the last 20s were okay, right? Because it was, the end of Prohibition and the roaring 20s.
Yeah.
2029, if we're reflecting over the course of 100 years, the 30s didn't go too well for anyone, but we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, well, let's turn this thing around.
That's
here.
right. Let's for one time in our existence, let's learn from the past. I bring up this question because I kind of think that you, perhaps more than any other person in the modern surfing era, you seem to be someone who exemplifies like a belief in themselves in terms of breaking boundaries and just, excellence across the aforementioned disciplines. It seems like it is something you've been pushing yourself to do in small wave surfing in the shortboard space, specifically over the last few years. We've seen you working with Kelly Slater and surfing in QS events. Can you walk us through the last few years of that part of your surfing and how that applies to 2020?
Yeah, surfing small waves, I've always loved tiny waves. I love grinding little waves. And I don't think I'm that great at it yet, but I love learning. And I've always been sort of an outsider to surfing since the beginning. Like even in my own local community on Maui, it was pretty rough and core kind of growing up. This is kind of before social media and all that stuff. And I've been used to being kind of an outlier, being in other sports. So I'm really not afraid of what people think necessarily or losing, because in my own environment, I, people always tell me, it's like, why don't you just stick to big waves or you stick to what you're kind of good at and you're never going to make it in small waves. And it's only a few people, and it actually just motivates me. I love it when there's like traction against me. It just gets me super fired up because all of a sudden kind of gives me more of a purpose to go out there and really get better. And I see, some of the best surfers in the world come out of Maui. And when I get to surf with them, it's so inspiring. And I'm like, one day I'm going to be doing what they're doing. And I've never felt like I've been somebody who gets really good at something really quick. I've always felt like it's taken me longer than my peers. But once I get it, then it's just like all downhill. Like I'm just flying. And that's how I've always felt. Like big wave surfing, that kind of the intro into that, it was really like, it was long, and like I could see my own peers like, going far beyond me. And then all of a sudden I hit a certain comfort level. And then I found myself, feeling like every swell I was getting better, and I was getting better waves, and I was going deeper, and there was just no limit to how I could improve until I would get absolutely smoked and injured. So I'm kind of taking that into small wave surfing. Yeah, it's taking me a while to get better, and I'm on this slow progression, but fortunately I have a lot of really amazing people that I can surround myself with and be inspired and learn from. And small wave surfing, shortboarding, it's the hardest sport in the world, for sure. I think it's a lifetime pursuit, and I tip my hat to all the guys and girls that shred so hard, and I want to be there because it's a challenge and it's fun. And I mean, why else would I do it?
Well, and that's interesting, right? I think you mentioned it before, like you're 27, you're very, very young. And I think that experience in the sense of getting very, very good at all these other disciplines probably provides you with a lot of confidence that you can do almost anything. The thing in shortboarding that I've noticed, and we've had these conversations on this podcast before, is something that doesn't really translate to the public is just the speed and power and just how good the world's best surfers are.
It's insane.
It's insane. Like it's
insane.
Just the jump between the QS and the CT is so huge.
Oh, well, the opportunities that I have had to surf with the best, guys and girls in the world in surf, you just see how fast they're moving, how solid they are on their board, how much spray they're throwing, and it's super clear. It's just on another level. And I'm like, it just looks so much fun. Like, why wouldn't you want to get to that level? But I mean, those guys and girls have put, their blood, sweat, and tears into it. And a lot of them are very, very talented. I think it comes very naturally as well. But when you watching it on the webcast and watching it in person, it's totally different. Watching it in person is jaw dropping. It's incredible. I mean, I love being in the water with these guys and girls because they really are just taking things to the next level. And they go, especially the world champions, they have that X factor. There's something, and maybe you can't even explain it. Like, what is it that they're doing differently? But they have that. And I love the energy that, people like Italo or even Gabriel bring in the water. Like they're just hungry and they're just moving, and it's that Brazilian storm. And then you have like someone like John who's like, it just looks like he's like kind of has that Kelly factor where waves come to him and he does incredible things, and it's almost nonchalant. So everyone has their sort of different approach, but getting to the core of your question or your statement is like, yeah, everyone goes so much faster in real life.
Looking at your shortboarding over the last few years where you've concentrated on it, like what are the kind of the major steps or moments of improvement that you've seen? I mean, not that you haven't shortboarded small waves for your whole life, but I think I'm more interested in kind of since you've turned the knob up on, I want to get really, really good at this. What have been kind of the big milestones for you in the last few years?
I think the big milestones for me is kind of putting together a full wave,
right?
Like the art of flow, trying to like piece everything together without either losing speed or getting used to going a lot faster. Because sometimes I think surfing small waves are, harder than surfing big waves. And big waves, you have a lot of time. Like if you allow yourself to be, you can take a breath, you can size up a section, you can size up a barrel and like, okay, here it comes, it's setting it up. And in small waves, man, you got to be so on your toes and so quick, and it's really reactive and you can't think. At least that's been my approach, is really letting go, just allowing my own ability to kind of come out, and you almost question how you did that on a wave. Like, oh, wow, I kind of pieced it together. And is using video analysis and seeing it just for what it is really been helpful for me as well, you know? But the small wave surfing, I think my biggest struggle, which is really weird, is probably doing airs. I feel way more comfortable getting barreled and doing big turns and stuff, but I feel so comfortable in doing airs in other sports. It's just a fully different sort of technique to get into the air. Once I'm in the air, I feel so good. It's just the initial launch has been like my struggle. It's like I'm either trying to overspin early, or I'm waiting too late, or my feet position are wrong. And I always joke though too that like I've been working on my cutback since I was 9 years old. It's like one of the more basic maneuvers, but it's still like to do it perfectly every time is like sometimes hard.
It's kind of funny. Like I recently got a mid-length, and you know I'm terrible. Well, I'm terrible in general, but terrible on a mid-length. But the whole approach to it is like, well, I mean, the goal for me on it is just to get the longest wave I can, and then maneuvers become a function of lengthening the ride.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? That actually is what shortboarding is too, but I've never approached it with that mentality, because I'm like, I just want to hit it as hard as I can. But in reality, like all these maneuvers are there as a function to maximize the wave in a lot of ways. So a lot of times it's like a mentality thing.
Mm-hmm. I agree. But I mean, surfing those different boards makes you realize, like, I think if you get too stuck on just shortboarding, your surfing almost becomes a one-dimensional, you know? I think it's good to change it up and ride like the mid-lengths and even logs and even high-performance longboards or foils or whatever it is, just to see the wave as a different canvas. And so you're not getting too stuck, especially in your progression of learning. Like once you're on the top level, you think you got to like kind of chip away and maintain a lot. But in my sort of quest to get to becoming a better shortboard surfer, sometimes stepping away and coming back, I just start surfing better. I think maybe because I'm less invested in what I have to do and more focused on, you know, whatever the wave would allow me to do.
I'd imagine, too, that your background and experience in these other disciplines provides you with advantages that other people don't. You know, a few years ago when John got into sailing, I remember talking to Ross Williams about it, and he was like, well, it is a kind of training. You know, like he's out there and he's looking at the way water moves and looking how it interacts with different kind of vessels, and he's internalizing that and then taking that back into his high-performance surfing. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that from windsurfing or stand-up paddle racing or big wave surfing or tow surfing or any of these other disciplines that you thought, wow, I took something there that maybe other people didn't have into my shortboarding.
Oh, absolutely. Like speed is probably the number one thing, because in all these other sports, you're constantly going fast, and chop is irrelevant, you know, because you're used to it. So I'm coming into shortboarding, I mean, the faster I can go, I feel like the better I can surf. And so it's learning how to like get up to speed though sometimes. And, you know, choppy, windy conditions, I'm from Maui, man. This is like, I almost prefer that over glassy conditions because it gives you a coping to sort of hit at the top of the wave. I think the surfing is the base for all these sports. And I think maybe surfing gives to these other sports maybe more than sometimes like these other sports give to small wave surfing. If anything, I think all these sports kind of give to big wave surfing more in terms of like surviving and performing on a big wave, just because you're dealing with speed and chop and giant walls of water. In small waves, I really feel like something like kite surfing is epic because you're getting towed around. You don't need a jet ski, but you're getting towed around and you can figure out how to like position on the boards, and you can figure out how to fly on a shortboard without straps and get really used to kind of those aerial rotations. Yeah, you have a kite that's towing you around and lifting you, but at least it's like time on the water. You know?
The physics are the same in a lot of ways.
Yeah, the physics are the same. I mean, you're using the way you position the board is you're kind of always pressing against the wind, or you're using a wave as leverage to kind of stick the board to your feet. And I found that has been a very helpful way to kind of like work out kinks. Like, all right, why is my back knee bowing out when I do a top turn on surfing? Like, how can I position my hips and how can I position my whole body and my stature to kind of pull it through? Well, I'm going to take my kite out. I'm going to catch 50 waves in 30 minutes. And I'm going to just every wave like, oh, okay, that's what you got to do different. Change it. So I use these sports a lot to kind of adapt and to help my small wave surfing. But small wave surfing, man, I just feel like it's about time, putting time into doing it, like more than anything. That's been my experience anyway. Like if I do a week straight, 2 weeks of just pure shortboarding, I mean, I'm doing other sports on the side as well, but really focus on that, I start seeing gains. But as soon as I'm not fully invested into it, I go back to that one level that I was. And so I think once you get to a certain level, you can maintain it and stay there, and you don't have to do it all the time.
Yeah, your floor gets increased to that point.
Yeah, and that's just your body kind of knows, okay, this is how we do things. But as you try to rise to it, it's like, I think it's just time and time and time and time and time.
That makes total sense. Tracking a little bit back to that conversation on the Ultimate Waterman, and we mentioned John. I think it was a couple years ago, it felt like when John was diversifying into sailing and foiling and things like that, and the public conversation around the two of you, because you both rode for Hurley, was kind of around this, who is the ultimate waterman? Is it someone like Kai Lenny? Is it someone like John? And that also felt like the dial got turned up a little bit on you shortboarding. So a two-part question. Was there any credence to that, or was that just sort of the market projecting sort of a storyline on the both of you? And did that result in your current approach to the QS? Is the championship tour at some point a goal for you?
I mean, John, I consider a good friend, and it's always fun when you can go do multiple things in the water with people. You know, you're not like, all right, this is my friend group for this sport, and then this is my friend group for that one. And, you know, you're kind of like this lone dog kind of wandering around to different tribes. And so when I saw John was getting into foiling and to sailing, I was just instantly like stoked. I was just like, yeah, this is awesome. Like,
you get to spend more time with my friend, sort of thing.
Yeah, you get to spend more time with your friend, but then at the same time, it's like, all right, I'm not crazy. Like, it's actually really fun.
He left the freeway for a minute, and you're like, oh, it's fun over here.
And I feel like he's someone who's so naturally gifted, and everything he does, he's really connects well with. And I was just really excited to see him taking on something that I've been doing sort of my whole entire life, and just seeing how he approached it, you know? And I knew I always felt like it helped me doing other stuff, and it translated to, you know, kind of the core surfing side of things. But here's the best surfer on the planet at this moment. You know, he's going and doing these other things, and I think it's only making him a better athlete in surfing. And I always heard the conversation that, you know, he should focus more on that and not be sailing around. But the thing I think people don't realize or forget is when you're sailing between channels in Hawaii, there's open ocean swells. And in order to navigate your sailboat properly, you're having to read these swells and you're having to connect the dots. So it's like find the path of least resistance and surf this boat. So he's surfing a sailboat, and he's using the wind. And here's a guy who uses wind when he's surfing to do massive aerials, you know, being able to read the bumps coming up the face that maybe will give an opportunity for a barrel, or maybe avoid it because it's going to clamp. You know, it's like giving signals that he's learned somewhere else. And because his surfing is at such a high level, he doesn't need to surf necessarily every day to get better.
Right. His floor is already pretty high.
His floor is as high as anyone's.
But that's kind of why I go back to the advantage you probably have, and why you're nowhere near hitting your floor or your ceiling for your shortboarding, is because you have all these other reference points that not only afford you more time in the water, because it's conditions agnostic, you can kind of put whatever craft you want out there, but you're seeing things that people, 99.9, maybe like 100% of other people at these other levels are never going to see.
Yeah. Oh, well, I agree with you on that sense for sure. Like, it's showing up to the same wave you've surfed every single day and having a different perspective on it. And then going back to maybe shortboarding and seeing it the same way you did windsurfing or stand-up paddling or something. You know, it's like you see it from a different perspective, and maybe it reveals kind of like the gift of improvement.
Sure.
And gosh, there's no better feeling to me, and I think I chase this a lot, is like when you have a little breakthrough,
right?
And it's like, oh, I feel so like there's relief involved, and then there's also excitement involved, and then it's like I don't see myself ever having limits in anything I do, including shortboarding. Like, my dream setup is to be able to do everything everyone can do and be at the highest level, and then start to incorporate maneuvers that I've been doing my entire life, or part of it from other sports, like different tricks, and start becoming an innovator and progressing my own surfing in a unique way. Like, I still feel like I'm trying to get the fundamentals of it all, the baseline.
Sure.
And then, I mean, there's tricks that I get to do kite surfing all the time that I'm like, gosh, if a surfer was to try something like this, it could just be a whole new approach to riding a wave or just a new trick in general, right? And I have a couple on my mind. I'm just waiting to get good enough to try it. It's like, yeah, maybe I'll go out and try it. And I usually like credit card myself or get super smoked. And I'm excited one day to get that opportunity with confidence to go out there and be like, okay, I'm going to nail this new maneuver because it's been sticking in my head for 10 years.
All right, well, let's roll the tape back a bit. Born in Maui, dipped into the ocean before you were 1 week old, learned to surf at 5, windsurf at 6, stand-up paddle at 7. I didn't even know stand-up paddling was a thing when you were 7.
Yeah.
Kite surf at 9, sponsored by 10. Your parents moved to Maui specifically to windsurf. Like you were born to this in a lot of ways.
I hit the lottery where I was just born in the right place at the right time. And yeah, it's just insane. I have to give my parents massive credit for just facilitating the opportunities. I mean, they came from very, very humble beginnings. And I always felt a desire to represent them in a way and become very successful. My parents worked themselves up to really reputable places. When I was growing up, though, my dad was managing a restaurant and, he was always working. And my mom was a doctor at Kaiser, and so she was always working. And our grandmother would pick my brother and I up, and we'd go to the beach. And because she lived, fortunately, in a condo across the street from the beach. And it was like perfect because it was an opportunity to get in there. And anytime my parents had time, they just dedicated their entire existence to allowing us to have the opportunity to get in the water. And they never pushed us to be pros or anything.
Right.
But it was natural to want to be a professional athlete on Maui when a lot of the sports that I've involved with now were being invented before my eyes.
Right.
Kite surfing was just exploding onto the scene. And it was always about doing 60 to 70 foot airs at Ho'okipa. Surfing has always been a core part of the culture on Maui, having some of the best waves on the planet. Tow and surfing was becoming, it was changing the landscape of big wave riding with Laird and the whole strapped crew. And so I was just exposed at the right time in history to everything that was fresh and new. And I was the first generation to start these sports from a young age. And I think it did give me a head start in some ways because I was in the mecca for a lot of these places. Like the mecca of surfing was on the North Shore of Oahu, but that was a 30-minute flight. And then, these other sports were the mecca was on Maui. And so my superheroes weren't the comic book characters of Marvel and DC, the Justice Leagues or Avengers. It was literally the strapped crew at Jaws. And it was the windsurfers at Ho'okipa and the kite surfers at Kite Beach. It's like, I guess I was really fortunate. And I had just the most loving, caring parents who dedicated everything to me and my brother.
You talked about prior, the freeway, which I guess we could say would kind of be the conventional shortboard path in surfing, and then sort of the unconventional path that you took. Do you think that had you grown up in a different location like the North Shore, that you may have ended up on the freeway at a younger age?
I always felt like I am a product of my environment. So I would imagine if I grew up on the North Shore of Oahu, I would have been very, very surf-centric, like
Right.
shortboard.
Yeah.
I mean, you have the best waves on the planet, and the best sport to do over there is surfing. Maui has such a diverse set of conditions. It's, you can surf every day, but it doesn't mean it's the best thing to do every single day.
Sure.
And so I do feel like I'm just a product of my environment. Man, if I was born in the mountains, I might just be a mountain person, I do feel like a very strong connection to the ocean, however. And, everyone has to find their own path. And I never felt like my path was, the traditional way in surfing where you go and do, all the NSSAs. I mean, I did some of them. Then you do the Pro Juniors, you get on the QS, and then you hopefully make the CT and you become world champion. It's just, I don't know. It just never felt like kind of how my path was going to go. Sometimes I even question, feels like everything is already happened and I'm sort of just following this sort of trail, this movie that is unraveling before me again, But, at the same time too, I feel like I have enough talent to get to the levels that I want to get to, though it takes me longer than some of my peers. And when I was younger, I just maybe couldn't even keep up in that shortboard landscape initially. So it was like, instead of going through the front door, I'm going to go through the back door and go backstage.
Well, and it feels now kind of like the quarantine a little bit between, high level competitive shortboarding and all things surfing is breaking a little bit, to where someone like yourself is considered one of the best surfers in the world, and you're interacting with other people that are the best surfers in the world. It's sort of, although the disciplines are very different, it's all kind of surfing as a larger idea. I think you started surfing Jaws at 16?
Yeah, the first time I surfed Jaws when I was 16 was actually on a hydrofoil with snowboard boots.
Sure.
And
as most people.
Yeah, and it was with Laird and Dave Kalama. They gave me a call. And
had they done it, or were you just like the canary in the coal mine where like, this seems batshit insane, let's see if Kyle do it?
No, they were doing it.
Okay.
And I remember it being at first very embarrassing for me because I hadn't foiled in a year or two. And my snowboard boots at the time, like the salt just ate them away and I didn't realize it. And I put them on and we're out at Jaws. No one's out. It's 15 foot. And Dave tows me up. Laird's there for safety. And all of a sudden my boots just disintegrate. And I'm freestanding on this foil board. And back then it's like you couldn't ride these things without the support of a snowboard boot. And I ended up just jumping off the foil because I was like, do I just let go? Like, I'm not going to catch a wave like this. And I could see the disappointment in Dave and Laird's face. Like, what are we doing with this guy here? Like this kid.
They seem like understandable guys.
No, they're totally, but it was
Laird.
like, I think they were just like, they're like, oh, like this is taking away from our time out here,
right,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I just lifted my foot up and they could see my bare feet on the bottom of these boots. And they're like, then you saw that they realized, oh, it was just a malfunction of equipment. And I ended up getting towed into a couple waves, and one wave I recall kind of broke behind me and hit me, and they were relieved I didn't fall because they're like, that one would have hurt, especially when you're attached to,
right.
A guillotine under your feet is an aluminum foil and you're in snowboard boots. There's no getting out immediately. And I'm throwing it a little forward to kind of my first actual surf session out there.
Right.
Well, my first time I paddled into it was on a stand-up out there, and it was when Shane came over. He had the first pole vest. No one else had pole vests in the lineup yet. It was like his first real test in big waves at Pe'ahi. He won. He blew the lid wide open on surfing Jaws in Pe'ahi, and I caught a crazy stand-up paddle wave, which was my biggest paddling wave for a long time, and it was horrifying. I was like so relieved when I kicked out because it was one of those situations I thought if I fell, I would die for sure. And then my first paddling session, it was like a year later, and it was the year Dave Wassel caught a really big straight hander at Jaws, like made a crazy drop and kind of went straight, and everyone had inflation at that point. And my first time paddling into any big waves was at Jaws. So I kind of just started surfing big waves at, the pinnacle of big waves, which in the beginning was kind of eggy. It was like, I probably should have started off going somewhere else first, but you know what? I'm in it now. It doesn't get much better than this in the long run in terms of performance on a big wave.
And it probably pushed your comfort envelope so far that a lot of the things that maybe sat a little bit beneath that threshold of intensity felt more comfortable, where otherwise you would have had to build up to it in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, still to this day, my worst beatings have been out at Jaws. So it's nice to know when you're traveling to go surf big waves, it's like, all right, I've already been through potentially the worst of it. And, I can find some comfort in going to these other big waves, though you can never, expect, you could always get your worst wipeout surfing any big wave around the world. But, I mean, just God, pound for pound, Jaws will just beat you senseless. It feels like Chopu mixed with Nazaré. You have the hold down, and then you also have the thrashing, and I feel like every part of your body's going to get ripped off. Especially, I was a really small guy when, I was like 16, 17.
Unlike now where
I'm a little bigger. But yeah, I'm 5'8" of pure muscle.
There you go.
No,
pound for pound, baby.
Before I used to be like, people would come up to me on the beach and be like, God, we thought you were like 6'6" because you're riding big waves. I'm like, no, it's better that I'm small. It makes the waves look bigger.
There you go.
That's my excuse to being small. It wasn't my choice.
What's interesting when you talk about the discipline jump at a place like Jaws, I mean, whether it's the dilapidated snowboard boot foil experience or stand-up paddleboarding or tow surfing or paddling surfing, and I think now kind of the big conversation is around tow surfing and paddling surfing. And even recently, there was a session out there that really pushed the boundaries in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah. It's like the sport. I think the biggest place for growth in surfing is tow and surfing right now. There's just really no limit to what you can do. I mean, you have the biggest waves. You can position yourself consistently in the perfect spot. and you can get a million waves. And I think paddling, the thresholds that are being pushed are like it's going beyond what people thought was possible still.
Sure.
You know, like, I mean, there's really like big wave surfing has a long way to go to ever reach a definitive limit. And it's because every wave that comes in is different too, right? And it takes a slightly different approach. It's not just a tennis court or basketball court where you can kind of repeat, you know, and you're not limited to how high you can go. So if you're trying to do aerials on a tow board or even, you know, getting long barrels, like big waves will barrel for a long time. I mean, we've counted 10-second barrels out of Jaws. You're like, well, if you sat there, you paddled in here, and you had the guts to kind of knife into it, you get 10-second tubes out there, twice as long as anyone else has gotten up to this point. And the problem is the consequences are insane. You know, like just to be lucky enough to get a wave in that position on a day that is doing it, whoo, you know, you're playing with fire. And what's nice about tow and surfing, though, is you can get the slingshot into those positions consistently and kind of work it out. And then that can translate into paddling too. So, I mean, everyone's really into paddling, and I think they should be. I think no one should tow surf but me. I'm having too much fun, that's why.
Well, I mean, to that end too, like there's very few people that are really at the highest level of both. Like you are incredibly accomplished paddling big wave surfer and tow surfer. Sometimes people focus on one discipline or the other. How do you kind of parse those two disciplines just in your own life?
Well, I think with my experience in doing other sports, it's never been about the sport. It's always been about riding the wave. For me, surfing is the ride. It's the experience. And however I choose to do it with a different tool is a different experience. And I love big waves to my core. I think it's given me my life's purpose in a way, to put myself in positions to work on equipment, to build my, you know, physical being into what it is to survive. So going out and riding big waves is the same to me. It's just a different approach. Like when I see guys getting incredibly big waves and paddling into huge tubes, I want to do the same thing. You know, it's like I don't feel like I'm limited because I do tow and surfing. And when I go tow and surfing, you know, I'm always trying to look back at old footage of, you know, the strapped crew back in the day. And now I mainly watch snowboarding because they're riding a big frozen mountain and they're doing tricks. And it's like, that's my inspiration for that. And again, the experience of riding a big wave, be it on a gun or be it on a towing board, I just want to surf 12 hours in a row because it's such a rare experience and it makes me feel so good as a human being. And it puts me in check. It brings me back down to earth. It's grounding, and I find only benefits from the whole experience. So if everyone's paddling and it's a paddle day because of the wind, dude, I'm going to paddle all day.
Right.
And that's going to be my focus. And if it's really windy and no one's paddling and it's not ideal for paddling, I'm going to get on the tow rope and I'm going to catch 50 waves. And they benefit each of them. Like the confidence that you get from paddling and sitting in the pit and getting comfortable dodging huge waves and then taking off late and just getting under the lip of a huge tube and then hopefully getting spat out or getting absolutely destroyed. That goes to tow and surfing because now tow and surfing, you can position yourself the same place, but you're on a tiny board that goes really fast. And it's funny when we're talking about Jaws, Pe'ahi on a gun, you're always feeling like you're behind the 8-ball. Like, oh, I'm dropping in bottom turning. Please hold open because your boards are way slower. There's a lot of drag. You have a hose for a leash behind you, slowing yourself down. And then on the tow board is the opposite problem. You're going too fast.
Right.
So to get barreled on a tow board, you have to look like you're taking off on a closeout.
Right. It's
And
all positioning wise.
It's all positioning.
Yeah.
Like the wave needs to look like a perfect closeout because no matter how deep you think you are, you can be 10 feet deeper.
Right.
So the comfortability of getting destroyed paddling and getting used to those experiences and always feel that feeling of being behind the wave and not keeping up translates to towing. All of a sudden it's a common view. And I'm like, well, if I need to hit the gas pedal, I can pump. Something I can't do on a gun.
Right.
And I think that's why they've been feeding one another so well. And it just goes down to the root as to what I love to do out there. It's just I just love riding big waves. I just love it.
You talked earlier about also just hunting big waves down globally, and you're someone who has a really intimate experience at a number of the famous big wave spots, Mavericks and Todos Santos and Waimea and Piahi, and you've spoken a little bit about Piahi, but I'm interested in your opinion on the nuances and differences between sort of those four spots, as Mavericks and Waimea, Todos, and Piahi. How do you kind of rate them in your mind, and what are sort of the benefits or scary parts of each?
Well, I think there's big waves in the world, and then there's big waves in the league of their own. Like there's something that sort of changes. A place like Mavericks, the takeoff spot's like 10 feet. It's the smallest. It's like the most perfect in terms of paddling because there's one place that you can take off from. Jaws is about 200 yards wide, and there's 3 places you can kind of take off there. I mean, pound for pound, each one could potentially kill you. Mavericks has killed people, and it's due to that hold down. I would say the thrashing at Mavericks it's always bad, but it's not as bad as maybe, say, Jaws in my experience. But what's gnarly about it is the hold down. You get stuck in these ledges, and you just feel like if you feel claustrophobic, that's a good place to go. If you like feeling claustrophobic, that's a good place to go because
most of our audience does, so that's helpful.
Yeah, so it just feels like you're trapped in a box and there's nothing you can do. And
that's at Mavericks.
That's at Mavericks.
I think would the wetsuit have something to do with that too? You're wearing thick rubber compared to these other places.
But then again, too, I feel more safe and comfortable getting pounded underwater with a 5mm booties, gloves, and a hood.
It's like an impact suit.
Yeah, you just feel like you're being cradled underwater. Whereas sometimes surfing warm water spots, be it at Cloudbreak or Jaws or Waimea, you feel exposed, sort of. You're wearing the bare minimum of float and inflation for so you don't overheat and for comfortability.
Sure.
Paddling and everything, right? And so, but then underwater you feel vulnerable, like, oh my gosh, like I could feel it directly on my skin.
Yeah.
And then now let's throw in a huge spin, which is going to a place like Nazaré.
Right.
And Nazaré is the world's biggest beach rake, and that place is just psycho. I mean, it just kind of it makes you feel comfortable at all these other big waves because all these other big waves have channels.
Right.
Nazaré is a spot you can't paddle without a jet ski. Like, it's the one wave you always need jet ski assistance. Like, sure, you can catch one good wave, maybe get lucky and paddle back out. You're probably inevitably going to get caught inside, and you're probably going to get blown to the sand at one point. And then you're going to walk 2 miles around the point to get back out because there's no paddling out. Even jet skis barely make it out, right? It's all about timing. And so what I take away from all of these different spots is there's characters to them, there's the nuances, and they really, really help kind of each experience at the other. I mean, Jaws to me is like going to pipe. It's perfect wave. It's backdoor pipeline, or massive V-land, as some would say. But that's where you go. That's where high performance and big wave surfing lives. At a place like Mavericks, that's where the steepest and craziest drops are. It's the biggest slab in the world when you really think about it. And then at Nazaré, it's survival. It's wrangling the beast. It's confronting, you're David and that's Goliath, and it's breaking everywhere. And I figure now, and I really understand now, the more opportunities I get to surf big waves, the more I could find comfort in my experiences. It's not comfort in the big waves. You never will feel comfortable unless you're crazy, and I think you'll ultimately you'll ultimately pay the price. But you find comfort in your experiences, and that's why guys like Shane Dorian, Greg Long, Ian Walsh, Twiggy, and there's many others. They're the older guard. Some of them are old enough to be some of the young guns' parents, but they have the experience. And big wave surfing at this point in time is more important to be about experience than, a young buck just trying to stomp his way in, because it takes years to acquire all of it.
For sure. When it comes to tow surfing, do you have one driver that you work with on the ski?
Fortunately, I have a good list of people that, depending on how their work schedule is or what they're up to, I can kind of call upon.
Right.
I've had the honor of being towed in by the guys that pioneered tone surfing out at Jaws, like Derek Dorner, Victor Lopez, Dave Kalama, Laird. And then we have, a lot of amazing water safety guys that I trust my life with as well. Keola Kernan, Kolomona, Curtis Chunky, the Walsh twins, DK and Sean Lopez. There's a lot we're really lucky to have a lot of people that are our guardian angels and people that I trust to tow me in to the biggest waves of my life. and put me in positions that I want to be in, but that I trust I can make it from, you know?
Right.
It's always about positioning on the edge of destruction, but you're going to make it. You know, it's like position me in a place where if I fall, it'll be the worst wipeout of my life or it'll be the ride of my life.
Right. Now, in terms of, I'm interested, and feel free to say I don't want to answer that. In terms of the business relationship between the surfer and the tow driver at a contest or just looking for editorial, is there sort of an unspoken arrangement in terms of, okay, well, look, if we get this amount of exposure and we get this amount of sponsorship incentive or this amount of prize money, I'm splitting it 50-50 with the driver or 90-10. Is there anything like that? I'm not even talking about yourself, but maybe just generally in the big wave community.
I think in the big wave community, big wave surfers are probably the poorest of surfers, like lesser than almost any others because they spend all their surfing big waves is expensive.
Sure.
Very expensive. Like people are dropping $5,000 or more a swell a day just to have the cameras, of course, but then also the boats, the jet skis, the people driving the jet skis, driving the boats, kind of the whole safety mechanism.
The 11th hour nature of everything. Yeah.
And traditionally, I would say the partnerships are two surfers typically, whereas my partnerships have been, just me surfing.
Right.
And just having the driver. So I pay the driver, I pay them the amount to tow me all day, and that's their fixed amount, and a bonus them if I can win the biggest wave of the year or ride of the year, whatever. It's like sharing the love for sure. But I know a lot of other big wave surfers in the past, they go 50-50 in, like, hey, if
because it's two surfers or something like that.
Yeah. So it's like in the past, someone wins ride of the year or biggest wave. It's like, you just split it with your driver because you wouldn't have caught the wave without your driver, and or even your water safety.
Sure.
You probably wouldn't have gone on that wave or taken that sort of risk if someone wasn't there. And the landscape's changed a lot. Fortunately, I'm in a position where I have a lot of support from my sponsors and I reinvest a lot of the money I make straight back into that experience because it's my passion. It's like a passion project more than anything.
Of course.
But I've been talking to a lot of kids who want to get into it, and then they realize how expensive it is. I mean, you could buy a $1,000 big wave board, destroy it on the rocks, doing catch a wave on it. And then, recently I lost a jet ski on the rocks. There's $14,000 down the tube. It's like, I have sponsors, of course, but I'm still footing the bill 99% of the time. And so it's just big wave surfing is an expensive pursuit, but it depends on how far you want to take it, of course. You can get a pole vest and you could go to Waimea, or you could go to a place a lot more beach accessibility, and you can go have an amazing experience. But if you really want to, I think, get to that edge and push your own personal limits and the limits of the sport, you guys, it's an investment. There's an investment. It's the most expensive it's the most expensive sessions in surfing.
Unquestionably. I want to talk about fear for a second. Does Kai Lenny get scared?
I'm petrified, terrified all the time. I'm so scared. But the reason, I think everything we have as human beings is there for a reason, obviously. And they're sort of the senses, there's something to rely on or to bounce information off of. And fear, I think, can often be interpreted as like, don't do something, like very cut and dry. But I think fear is necessary to figure out where the line is of what you can and cannot cross. Sure. And fear gives you superhuman abilities. You get to the bottom of a wave and you hit a chop, and maybe normally you just fall, but that adrenaline kicks in, the fear of falling and dying, and you just wrangle that 10-foot board back under your feet and you pull into the barrel, and you just, you're flexing every muscle in your body to just take the impact of the foam and the shock waves in that tube. And without fear, you probably would be falling a lot more often. But then again, if you let fear consume you, you're not even going on the waves of your life, the best waves ever. So it's finding a balance, but it's understanding fear. That's been my kind of what I've been trying to learn, is like, how do you understand and use it to your advantage, and know when it's becoming, like, if I'm very fatigued
or
super tired, it becomes consuming. When you're super rested and trained really well, it becomes a tool. And so you just know by experience where things line up, you know. And some days it's okay when you surf big waves to go, this isn't my day, you know. I'm not feeling it. This is good. And you can see the best big wave surfers in the world do this all the time. They might not even catch a wave some days because they can balance it all out, you know. For me, it's something I'm still learning.
What's the scariest situation you've ever been in the ocean?
Fortunately, knock on wood, I've never been in a position where I thought I was gonna die. I've always maybe thought this is mildly inconvenient. I have to go through this experience right now. It's gonna be over, but you know, it goes without saying when you're pressed against the bottom at Jaws and you're held down for a minute, your inflation vest is fully open, you just did a scorpion on a 50-foot wave, leash is dragging you across the reef like, you know, you're being dragged behind a car. That's pretty inconvenient. Or sometimes getting lost when the jet skis can't find you and you're floating and you're not necessarily, it's just the fear of like, oh man, I hope a really big one doesn't come. I don't know. There's not one that really sticks out. All the injuries that I have had, like I sliced my hand really bad when I lost the jet ski on the rocks a couple months ago at Pe'ahi. Mm-hmm. And then I've also split my foot in half out of Jaws. I mean, I've gotten some pretty solid injuries surfing big waves, tweaking, you know, my legs and ligaments and everything, tearing my high ankle and everything. But what all those injuries have in common isn't the fear of when it happened or like, oh my gosh, like I got super injured, because they almost don't even hurt. You're so pumped with adrenaline and dopamine. You're just like, you're disappointed. I'm always disappointed that, oh my God, this means I'm out of the water for this long. That's the scariest. Like, will I ever, like in one moment, everything's changed, you know? That's the fear. I would say that's the scariest things that I've had to deal with. Like, will I ever be able to use my hand again? Will my foot ever be the same again? Will I be able to push myself in big waves like I want to? Those are, God, that sucks. That just makes my heart drop right now. Like, puts a coldness in my stomach just because it's, I guess I know for sure that's what I really love to do, even though it terrifies me. And sometimes I don't want to do it, but then I get on the water and I realize, well, yeah, gosh, why did I have to choose this of all things? But this is what I love to do. It's a passion. So not being able to do it is the greatest fear, and it's the worst experience. Sitting at home and knowing there's a Jaws swell and you're just pulling your hair out like, oh my God, what am I doing? Where did I go wrong?
What is a scarier, or I guess in terms of this conversation, a more mildly inconvenient situation for you? Is it paddling for a wave, missing it, turning around, seeing you were caught inside at Jaws? Or is it getting to the bottom of one and just getting blown up because you didn't make it around the corner?
I think it's more missing a wave than it is actually being on the wave, because it happens so quick when you're on the wave and there's no choice.
Your adrenaline's going. And
you drop in, and I actually had a wipeout that saw my perfect my perfect board that I used and had the best air drops of my life, competed on. It got demolished because I jumped off, and it was, you know, watching Albie 8 weeks ago in the contest get, you know, very slammed. Like, you know, poor guy is like neurological problems right now, and you know he's gonna come through because he's an animal and he can handle it. But it's gnarly. So he got lipped really hard, and if a guy like that's getting lipped and he's known for being the barrel guru out there, okay, that crossed my mind in this moment. Another one was that morning, a friend of mine broke his femur because his board came back in the lip and landed directly on him.
Right.
And I dropped into this wave. It was a nice drop. I went to pull into the tube. And it just, when you read when you're pulling into any tube, it's like, is it going to crumble? Is it going to pitch? And sometimes Jaws won't throw really hard in the beginning, and then it'll grow into a huge barrel. So sometimes you punch through the first little part of the tube, and then it turns into a cave. And this one, I was just in a position where it was going to land on my head, guaranteed. So I thought. And so I just stepped off. I just stepped off, because all that went through my head. You know, maybe, you know, Albie's having major head trauma issues. My other friend Ryan just snapped his femur in half because it was all lip related. And so I just I'm going to get away from my board right now. And I'm going to I would rather get just slaughtered underwater and thrashed around than actually meet this lip. And so there's been few waves that I've actually had in my experience out there where it's avoidance, if anything. And then But getting caught inside. I remember I had one at the Jaws contest like 2 years ago, 2017, I think. And I was caught inside, or I went for a wave. I fully could have caught it. It was the final, and I was just so frustrated because I was just not in sync, and I should have just gone over the ledge, but I kind of got a little scared, so I pulled back because there was some wind. And I looked back, and the whole horizon was black, and I could just see everyone barely making it over or bailing their boards and punching through, and it's a 50-foot, 60-foot wave. And there's a video of me like sitting there, and then I turn around, I just start paddling towards the beach because I wanted to get as far away from, I wanted that thing to diffuse impact as much as possible.
Yeah.
And I just remember having so long to think about my fate. Like I sort of sat there, I looked at the helicopter buzzing, I looked at the jet skis, and in that moment I was like, there's no one on this earth that can save me. I'm completely alone. Now I know what it feels like. Take some big breaths. And then start paddling in, and I could hear the thing breaking. I'm like looking over my shoulder, getting ready to bail. And then I bail and just get thrashed all the way to the rocks. And that sucks because you didn't do anything. You're just sitting there. At least you were charging when you were falling on a big wave. So yeah, no, and Jaws is notorious for getting caught inside too, because the current's always pushing onto the reef. It's dumping onto the reef. And with all the wind, the plumes of spray are going 200-300 feet in the air. So it's torrential downpour. On a perfectly sunny day, it's black and dark and like raining, and you can't see it. It's like BBs hitting you in the face. You can't even open your eyes, and all you see is the silhouette of a monster coming, and you're just like, whoa, this isn't good. And you start sprinting, and inevitably you have to you either make it or you bail, and so that's the most terrifying because it's just so out of your control. You're just sitting duck.
I think that's totally relatable. Speaking from the 4-foot wave level, I'm considerably more terrified getting caught inside by a 4-footer than having one close out while I'm up and riding. So I think that's right.
Yeah. It makes sense. It's big wave surfing is just it's surfing on just a little bigger scale.
Yeah, I appreciate the comparison. We started out this conversation talking about sort of the macro perspective of like, how do you view yourself and how do you view the path forward? I mean, even in 2020 so far, you've had some really, I'd say, opposite ends of the surfing spectrum in terms of what you can do with your career. You know, you went to China, Corona Open China, lost out to Nicholas Squires and Giorgio Gomez. Probably wasn't what you wanted. But then a few weeks ago, or last week, excuse me, you had one of those boundary pushing sessions out at Jaws. So you really are kind of living this wide spectrum of a professional surfer in 2020.
Oh, yeah. I love the feeling of kind of living multiple lives at once, like, oh, this is what it's like to be a QS surfer right now. And then like, okay, back into big wave mode, And my heat in the Corona Open, I learned a lot. I mean, this is why I did it, because I realized, okay, this is how you place your board in small waves. Like you can be told what to do, but until you're in a heat and you see what's getting scored and what isn't, it's like I learned a lot about my boards. I realized, man, being on the QS, equipment is as important as your surf skill, even more sometimes. If you have a good board that will be placed perfectly in these small grinding waves, you're going to get scores, It's like, I think equipment is really, really important. And I've been able to, like on that trip, I was traveling with Ian Gentile as well as Josh Moniz. So it's just, these guys are like really good QS surfers, and their goal is to make the tour, and they've been both very close in the past.
Sure.
And so it was just, of course I wanted to make that heat, and I felt like I ran the heat perfectly, like as I could have. What was missing was just a few little things, a little bit of equipment choice and a little bit of like board placement on the wave.
Right.
It wasn't that my surfing wasn't good enough. It was just certain maneuvers at certain times to get the score. And
do you switch shapers between shortboard surfing and big wave surfing, or do you try to work with similar ones?
Yeah, I have. Like with shortboarding, I've just been trying to figure out what works for me, really.
Right, yeah.
I don't even the sizes. Like I've been getting boards from Sharp Eye, JS, my local shaper at home, Keith DeWold, KT, and then getting some Dan Mann boards as well, and really just trying to figure out what suits my style. It's like I'm not totally confident in like what feels really good, and I've kind of gotten some really good ideas, and I'm grateful to have worked with those guys, and I'm happy to pay for boards because I know it's what I need to do to try to figure out what's going to work for me. And so I didn't take it as a loss so much as just a really good lesson. And if I was ever in that position again, I don't think I would lose. Because competitively, I'm so comfortable at it.
Right.
It's just learning the nuances of the judging and learning the nuances of what kind of performance you need to put out there, and then the equipment. And it was just funny going from the world's smallest waves to the world's biggest waves, within, one day. After the contest, I stuck around and was grinding small waves, trying to learn, saw Nazaré was going to be giant, hopped on a flight, dragged Ian along with me, and we went to Nazaré and surfed 4 days in massive waves. And, I said it earlier, but I'm going to say it again. Surfing small waves makes your big wave surfing better. Because in small waves, you don't have time to think about what maneuvers you got to do. In big waves, you have all the speed and power in the world, and you have time to think about it.
Right.
So if you can get used to being like quick,
quick twitch muscles,
quick twitch, punching, you can combine that with big wave riding, and it only benefits. So I can't wait for my next QS. I'm so psyched. I just want to go.
What is your next QS?
I think I'm gonna. Well, so this is the life of me, which is no complaints. I was totally going to do the Moroccan 5,000. I got in and I was like going to stick in Europe. I was just going to train. I'm like, okay, let's do this. And I saw there was a massive swell at Jaws. I'm like, this is what I have to go. So, well, it got really confusing. I wish I was in the Volcom Pipe Pro right now, because initially I was in the Sunset Open and the Volcom, but then I decided to take a different route on the QS and surf different waves.
Right.
Like, okay, I got to figure out my other small wave game. So I chose going to Hainan, China, but then I also chose, like, I'm going to do a different event like Morocco and really try to approach it from a different perspective. Mm-hmm. And maybe, a lot of those other events are really heavy with high seeds in Hawaii. And maybe I can get more points going to these other spots, like these kind of like offbeat events. And so I had to cancel Sunset, and I also had to cancel Volcom in order to do Morocco, which actually kind of worked out perfect because I was in Portugal, Nazaré, surfing, and it was going to roll straight into Morocco. So I was like,
is it the same swell that hits both spots? Or
it's the same swell.
Yeah, okay.
And it ended up being pretty small the first few days and got all right for the Moroccan event I saw.
Right.
Because it was just pumping before giant surf. And so I was like, God, I'm playing my cards all right in 2020. Right. And then, Jaws is, for me, it takes precedence over everything. Family obligations, everything. And everyone in my family knows that. But so then I ended up having to cancel Morocco, and I could have done Sunset and done the Volcom, but I already had canceled, so it was too late to get in them. And, no excuses. I was like, you know what? This is just how it's working. I'm going to focus on big waves in this week. And I'm going to go do the Tahiti events. Tahiti's an amazing place. I've been there a bunch. I want to do them. I just want to compete. Yeah. So I'm constantly looking at the schedule and kind of seeing what the big waves are, and if I can kind of tie that in with a small event somewhere and like a small wave event. And so I'm really just feel really open to everything, like changing the schedule right away if I have to. Right. And that's always been my approach, everything else. And if I get too, I think, like locked in, it doesn't work for me because I haven't been groomed that way, or I haven't let myself be that way. So I have to take it in a different approach. So I think my big wave surfing is going to be the best training for my small wave surfing. There's going to be no fear. That's why. Like, no competitor is more scary than a lip at Jaws.
I really like that. Before we get to the lightning round, I had a final question. What is with the Taco Bell thing? Do they pay you, or do you just like it? I mean, you're Kai fucking Lenny, man. That's a big endorsement. So I want to know, like, are you working with Taco Bell, or you just like it?
I just like Taco Bell. It's, throwing a funny story about it is I mean, I've been eating bean burritos my whole life. It's my favorite food. And I was doing all these channel crossing races, Molokai to Oahu, and I was trying to do this, like, you got to have this meal plan. This is what the ultra marathoners do. And I would always 3/4 of the way, I'd be winning this stupid race, and I would bonk, and I would be so close to glory. And I would
just eating the gels or whatever.
Yeah, the gels, and it's like you can't have any sauces on your chicken. You have to have like the purest brown rice there is. Eat some broccoli, and I like eating that stuff, but it was just not sustaining. And then one year, I was getting second, like every year, second or third, but I would be leading the whole time up to that point.
Right.
And finally, I just was like, you know what? I'm not listening to anybody. I'm going to just do this race the way I want. I trained how I wanted. I rode the board that I wanted. And then I ate what I wanted. I'm like, freaking, let's get the Taco Bell going here. Because, like, And I smashed the record and I won. And I've won the race every single time I've done it, which is Taco Bell. And I was like, you know what? And I broke it down. It's pretty simple. It's not like I'm having anything crazy. It's a bean and cheese burrito. You know, it's like it's easy to digest. It's light on the stomach, but it's filling. And, there's protein and carbs in it. And there's enough of both to kind of like balance you out. And if you get hungry, it's really easy to eat. I can stick it in my mouth and I can be paddling or I can be surfing and it could just be there and I can just kind of slowly eat it away. And at Jaws, we have 30 bean burritos on the boat. And, people who normally would never eat it always paddle up to the boat like, hey, can I have a burrito? Because it's the perfect food for being out in the ocean.
Well, I don't know if you've read that book, Born to Run, about the ultramarathoners, but something similar was in that. And there's I don't know what his name is, but like the guru of ultramarathon running, like wins literally every 100-mile race forever, was just like finishes, hours ahead of everyone
Was it
else.
Dean Karnazes?
I think it was the guy that predated him, because Dean's kind of the buff guy.
Yeah.
So it was the guy that kind of predated Dean. He was like a taller, kind of gangly guy.
Oh, okay.
And he used to smash everybody. And he had the same exact story in this book. He was like, my sponsors have given me the gels and this and that. He goes, but I just make myself a bean and rice burrito every morning, or a bunch of them, and I put them in my little running fanny pack, and I just chomp on those. He goes, it's the best thing for me.
Yeah, it's
almost
crazy.
the exact same story.
That's crazy. Well, it's like it keeps me going in big waves. I really, and just in general, like I think a bean and cheese burrito, and maybe you add rice or you add certain little things in there. God, it's the ultimate fuel, and it doesn't break apart when you're holding it, and you're in a rush to kind of do something. And it always feels nice when you hear stories like that. Like, all right, someone else is doing it, and I'm not crazy, And the whole Taco Bell thing, it's kind of turned into like a joke between a lot of people that I get to surf with, because they're like, where's the Taco Bell? It's like what people would least expect, but at the same time, it's perfect. And I have no affiliation with them at all. Actually, one time they someone who knew someone there got me like a gift from Taco Bell. And it was like a Taco Bell sweatshirt. And it was like a couple T-shirts with burritos on it. And it was a cool sentiment. It was really awesome. I mean, if I could have a Taco Bell on my board, freaking why not? That would be insane.
I'm with you. I was
non-endemic sponsor.
I was gonna ask if they give you a discount, but 100 burritos is like $30, so it's probably more hassle just to get the discount.
Yeah, I mean, my number one Christmas gift, because I'm a guy with everything. I'm so fortunate. I'm sponsored for just about everything I love to do. Number one Christmas gift, number one birthday present is gift certificates to Taco Bell. So I have thousands of dollars in gift certificates in my car, and like I have them spread out in places when I need them.
Sure.
My backpack for traveling. And if I lost my wallet and all else fails, I would just be hitting up Taco Bell every day until I figured it out.
Well, when we get the lineup marketing budget worked out, Fawcett, let's make sure we put down Taco Bell gift cards for Kai.
Okay, yeah.
All right, before we go, we have the lightning round. So this is 10 questions, fast as you can. You should know these questions.
Oh, no, I know. But it's one of those things you listen to the podcast and you're like, okay, what would I say? And you really think about it.
Yeah.
And then I totally forgot about the lightning round coming in here today. And now I'm like, oh my God. Like I didn't even
Google a smart sounding book or anything.
Dude, and then I'm going to get in the car driving away from here now and it's every question I'm going to have the sickest answer.
That's right.
Be like, oh my God, I sounded like such a dope.
That's right. That's perfect.
But here we go.
Let's go.
Sound like a dope.
One board set up for the rest of your life. This is going to be hard for you. Single fin, twin fin, thruster, quad, bonzer, or finless. Or foil, or with a sail. Or kite.
Oh gosh. You know what? It would be a quad because that's on my tow board, and it would be if I could surf giant jaws every day on a tow board. That's kind of combines every sport that I do into one. That's like trying to choose a sport though. Choose a board is like cutting off a finger. So I don't have any more fingers now after that question.
Just the one.
Just the one.
Coffee or tea?
Neither. Water and Red Bull.
Burrito or pizza?
Burrito, 100%.
I would put money on that answer. Last book you read?
Chicken Hawk, which is about a Vietnam helicopter pilot that won a bunch of medals in Vietnam and then had PTSD and started running drugs over the border from cartels because it was like being in Vietnam again. And then he ended up being like he ended up working with the CIA and FBI after. So it's just a psycho story. Makes everything that I do seem pretty mellow.
You're making good decisions by comparison. Best surf film ever.
Best surf film ever. You know what? That's really tough. I mean, I remember as a kid that movie, The Surfers. That intro with all the legends was so crazy. But I mean, probably, God, best surf film ever. There's so many good surf movies. It depends. Is it a Taylor Still film that gets you psyched for shortboarding, or is it Riding Giants that had an indelible mark as a kid to go surf big waves? Like, get me over that edge. You know what? I'm gonna just go with Riding Giants since I'm in this big wave routine right now. That movie was sick.
One wave you never have to go back to.
One wave that I never go back to. First time I went to Nazaré, I thought I never had to go back there. But now, if I don't have to go back there, I feel like I have to go back there because I need to feel like I want to like it there. You know what I mean?
That makes
one
sense.
wave, oh my gosh, where was like a poor experience? I don't want to diss anyone's waves out there, but no, actually, getting skunked going somewhere. Like I tried to go surf Skeleton Bay and I got super skunked and it took 55 hours, 56 hours. And when I was there, I was like, I know of waves closer to me that are maybe not as good, but similar.
Yeah.
And maybe I don't have to do 56 hours to get skunked.
It's a desolate landscape to just sit there with like the coyotes or the wolves or whatever with no waves and thinking like that was a long time to get here.
And you don't go there to do turns or airs or anything, you know? It's like it's either barreling or it's not really even surfable. It was fun though. It was fun. I'm going to go back, but it's taken a couple years to motivate.
It takes a couple years to get there. All right, only get to surf one wave for the rest of your life.
Jaws.
Best person to share a lineup with.
Best person to share the lineup with. The one having the most fun. No, the best person, if I had to choose, you know, the camaraderie coming in big waves is pretty insane. There's a list of people that I love surfing big waves with, but you know, it's really difficult. I think one of my most fun sessions I think I've had recently was tow and surfing with Nathan Florence, and it was just us two out there, and we ended up getting a double barrel. And that was maybe one of the coolest experiences I've had in big waves because it's such a solo act once you're on the wave. You get to share a really insane ride like a barrel and an experience like that in big waves. Like that you know what? I just love surfing with people who are having a lot of fun. And like, it's not too serious, you know? Surfing big waves can be a very serious, you know, pursuit. And someone like Nathan, someone like Albie, Ian Walsh, I mean, there's a bunch of guys that are it's just fun. It's like, we're doing it because it's fun. Nothing else, nothing more, nothing less.
I think it's a good answer. Worst person to share a lineup with.
Oh, there's a lot. I hate being hustled for no reason because I can hustle back with the best of them, but it's like, it just takes away from it's like eggy. I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus, but I have people in mind. Just know that.
I'm sure they know who they are.
They know who they are. You know when you spanked me that last time. No.
Last question. Finish this sentence. I will next achieve a state of happiness by...
I will next achieve a state of happiness by getting the biggest barrel of my life out of Jaws and spat out into the channel. Hopefully an 80-footer.
Kai Lenny, thank you for coming on the lineup.
Yeah, thank you. That was so fun.
So that's it. That's our conversation with Kai Lenny. I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't listened to our other pods yet, please download, listen, and subscribe if you like them. They're available wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back next Tuesday. Hope you get some waves wherever you are, and we'll see you then.